The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon on a quiet Saturday evening in Millbrook, a small town where everyone knew everyone. The streets were mostly empty, save for a few cars heading home after a long day. At the edge of Main Street stood Rusty's Bar, a place that had earned a reputation over the years. It wasn't the kind of establishment families walked into. The parking lot was always filled with rows of gleaming motorcycles, their chrome catching the last rays of daylight. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the smell of leather, motor oil, and bourbon. The walls were decorated with road signs, vintage bike parts, and faded photographs of long rides across state lines. A jukebox in the corner played classic rock at a low hum. Around a dozen bikers sat scattered across the bar, some nursing drinks, others deep in conversation. These were men and women who lived by their own code, bound by loyalty in the open road. They wore their vests with pride, patches sewn on with stories behind every thread. At the center of the room sat Marcus "Bull" Thompson, a towering figure with a thick gray beard and arms covered in ink. Bull was the president of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, a man whose presence commanded respect without him having to say a word. He was laughing with a few of his brothers, recounting a story from a ride they'd taken through the Rockies years ago. The mood was light, easy, nothing out of the ordinary. Then the door slammed open. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old. Her face was streaked with tears, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her pink sneakers were scuffed and dirty, her shorts torn at the knee. She looked terrified, desperate. Her wide eyes darted around the room, taking in the leather-clad figures staring back at her. For a moment, no one moved. The jukebox seemed louder in the silence. Then she screamed, "Please, somebody help me. My little brother is missing." Her voice cracked with panic, and the words hit the room like a thunderclap. Bull was on his feet in an instant, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt down in front of her, his massive frame somehow making her feel safer rather than more afraid. "Hey, hey, slow down," Bull said, his voice low and steady. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she choked out between sobs. "My name is Emma." "Okay, Emma, I'm Bull. You're safe here. Now tell me what happened." Emma's hands were shaking as she wiped her face. "We were playing in the park, near the woods. Me and my brother Charlie. He's only 5. He ran after a ball, and I looked away for just a second, and when I turned back, he was gone." Bull's jaw tightened. Around the room, the other bikers were already getting to their feet. Someone turned off the jukebox. The air had changed. "How long ago?" Bull asked. "I don't know," Emma said, her voice trembling. Maybe 30 minutes. I looked everywhere. I called his name. I ran home, but Mom wasn't there. I didn't know what to do. I saw the motorcycles and thought maybe—" She broke into fresh sobs. Bull placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Emma. We're going to find him." He stood and turned to the room. His voice boomed. "Everyone listen up. We got a missing kid, 5 years old. Name's Charlie. Last seen at the park near the woods on the west side. I want every bike out there. Now." There was no hesitation. Within seconds, the bar erupted into motion. Bikers grabbed their helmets, keys jangling as they headed for the door. Phones were pulled out, texts sent, calls made. Bull pulled out his own phone and dialed rapidly. "We need more body," he muttered. "Get the word out to every chapter within 50 miles. Missing kid. All hands." One of the bikers, a woman named Raven with short black hair and a scar across her cheek, crouched down next to Emma. "You're going to ride with me, okay? You're going to show us exactly where you were." Emma nodded, still trembling but feeling a flicker of hope for the first time since Charlie vanished. Outside, the sound of engines roaring to life filled the evening air. One by one, motorcycles rolled out of the parking lot, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness. Word spread fast. Texts, calls, social media posts. Within minutes, bikers from neighboring towns were gearing up. The Iron Wolves, the Steel Riders, the Thunder Road Brotherhood, rival clubs, friendly clubs, it didn't matter. A child was missing. That was all anyone needed to know. By the time Emma climbed onto the back of Raven's bike, Nearly 200 bikers were converging on Millbrook. The convoy rolled through town like a wave of steel and sound, drawing stares from every window. People stepped onto their porches, confused, curious. Some pulled out their phones to record. But the bikers didn't slow down. They had one mission. At the park, Bull brought his bike to a stop and killed the engine. Emma climbed off Raven's bike and pointed toward the edge of the trees. "There," she said. "That's where we were." Bull surveyed the area. The park was small, bordered by dense woods on one side. The sun was almost gone now, shadows stretching long across the grass. He turned to the growing crowd of bikers gathering around him. "All right, listen up," Bull said, his voice cutting through the rumble of idling engines. "We split into teams. Cover every inch of these woods. Stay in pairs. Keep your radios on. If you find anything at all, you call it in immediately." The bikers moved with surprising coordination. Groups of 2 and 3 fanned out across the park and into the tree line, flashlights clicking on as darkness settled over the town. The beams of light swept through the underbrush, searching for any sign of a small boy. Bull stood at the edge of the woods with Emma, Raven staying close to the girl. He radioed the others. "Keep your eyes open for tracks, clothing, anything. Kid's 5 years old, probably wearing a t-shirt and shorts. Blonde hair." "Copy that," came the responses, one after another. Emma watched the bikers disappear into the trees, her heart pounding. She felt guilty. She should have been watching him. She should have held his hand. Her mom always said to keep an eye on Charlie. He was so small, so trusting. What if something bad had happened to him? What if they didn't find him in time? Raven noticed the fear in Emma's eyes and knelt beside her. "Hey, these guys, they don't quit. If your brother's out here, they'll find him." Emma nodded, but tears welled up again. "What if he's scared? What if he's hurt?" "Then we get to him fast," Raven said simply. "But right now, you gotta be strong for him, okay? When we find him, he's gonna need his big sister." Emma wiped her eyes and nodded again, trying to steady her breathing. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, the search was intensifying. Bikers called out Charlie's name, their voices echoing through the trees. They moved carefully, checking behind bushes, under fallen logs, inside old sheds and abandoned structures scattered throughout the area. Some climbed small hills to get a better vantage point. Others waded through creek beds, shining lights into the water. One of the bikers, a broad-shouldered man named Tank, stopped near a cluster of brambles. He crouched down, his flashlight sweeping the ground. Something caught his eye. A small scrap of blue fabric snagged on a thorn. He radioed immediately. "Bull, I got something. Blue fabric. Looks like it could be from a kid's shirt." Bull's voice crackled back. "Mark your location. I'm coming to you." Within minutes, Bull and several others arrived at Tank's position. Bull examined the fabric, then looked up, following the direction the brambles faced. "He went this way." They pushed forward, moving faster now. The trail led deeper into the woods, away from the park. Bull's mind raced. A 5-year-old wouldn't wander this far on his own, not unless he was following something, or running from something. They came to a clearing. In the fading light, Bull noticed something odd. Tire tracks, fresh ones. They didn't belong to a car. Too wide, too deep. A truck, maybe, or a van. His blood ran cold. "Everyone hold up," Bull said, his tone sharp. The biker stopped. He pointed to the tracks. "Someone was here recently." One of the bikers, a wiry man named Gears, leaned down to inspect the tracks. "These weren't made by someone just passing through. Look at the pattern. They stopped here. For a while." Bull's fist clenched. This wasn't just a kid wandering off. Someone had taken him. He radioed back to the park. "Raven, get the cops here. Now. We've got evidence of a vehicle. This isn't a lost kid. This is an abduction." Back at the park, Raven was already on the phone with the police. Within minutes, sirens echoed in the distance. But Bull wasn't waiting. He turned to the bikers around him. "We keep moving. Follow these tracks. If there's a road nearby, that's where they went." The group pressed on, following the tire marks through the underbrush. The tracks led them to an old dirt road, barely visible through the overgrowth. It hadn't been used in years except for tonight. Bull stood on the road, scanning both directions. One way led back toward town. The other led deeper into the countryside, toward the old industrial district, where abandoned factories and warehouses sat like forgotten ghosts. That way, Bull said, pointing toward the industrial area. Let's move. The convoy of motorcycles roared back to life. They tore down the dirt road, kicking up dust and gravel. The sound of their engines was deafening, a rolling thunder that could be heard for miles. People in the nearby neighborhoods came outside, watching the procession with wide eyes. The police arrived at the park just as the last of the bikers disappeared down the road. An officer approached Emma and Raven. "We got a call about a missing child," the officer said. Raven pointed toward the woods. "They're already tracking him. Found evidence of a vehicle. We think someone took him." The officer's face went pale. He immediately radioed for backup. "We need units on the east side, near the old industrial district. Possible abduction in progress." Back on the road, Bull and his crew were closing in on the industrial area. Rows of old buildings loomed ahead, their windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti. It was a place most people avoided, especially at night, but not tonight. Bull slowed his bike as they approached the first cluster of buildings. He signaled for the others to fan out. They moved quietly now. Engines cut, flashlights off. They didn't want to spook anyone who might be hiding. One of the bikers, a younger man named Colt, spotted something near the far end of the lot. An old delivery truck, rusted and beaten, parked behind a collapsed warehouse. It looked like it hadn't moved in years, but the tires were still inflated, and the tracks in the dirt matched the ones they'd been following. Colt radioed Bull. "Got a truck, southwest corner. Matches the treads." Bull's heart pounded. "Don't approach. Wait for me." He moved swiftly through the shadows, a dozen bikers flanking him. They surrounded the truck, silent as ghosts. Bull approached the driver's side door and peered inside. Empty, but there was a smell. Something metallic, something wrong. He moved to the back of the truck and grabbed the handle. It was locked. Bull stared at the locked rear door of the truck, his jaw set. The metallic smell was stronger here, and something about the stillness of the vehicle made his instincts scream. He signaled to Tank, who stepped forward with a crowbar that had been strapped to his bike. "Stand back," Tank muttered. With one solid swing, the lock shattered. The door groaned as Bull yanked it open. Inside, the cargo area was dark. Bull pulled out his flashlight and aimed it inside. The beam swept across the interior, revealing old blankets, empty water bottles, and a torn teddy bear lying on the floor. His chest tightened. "He was here," Bull said quietly. "The kid was in here." Raven's voice crackled over the radio. "Bull, the cops are about 5 minutes out. What do you got?" "Evidence. The boy was in this truck, but he's not here now." Bull stepped back, scanning the surrounding area. If the truck was abandoned here, whoever had taken Charlie had moved him somewhere else, somewhere close. His eyes swept over the buildings, the crumbling warehouses, the rusted fences. Then he saw it, a faint light flickering from a window on the second floor of the largest warehouse, about 100 yards away. "There," he said, pointing. "That building. Someone's inside." The bikers moved as one, silently crossing the lot. They fanned out around the warehouse, covering every exit. Bull motioned for a few of them to circle around back while he approached the front entrance. The door was ajar, hanging on broken hinges. Bull pushed it open slowly. The inside of the warehouse was cavernous, filled with debris, broken machinery, and the smell of mildew. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a staircase leading up to the second floor. He started climbing, his boots making almost no sound on the metal steps. Behind him, Gears and Colt followed, their faces tense. At the top of the stairs, they found a hallway with several rooms branching off. The flickering light was coming from the room at the end. Bull approached the door and paused. He could hear something, a faint voice, a child's voice. His heart slammed in his chest. He looked back at Gears and Colt, then held up 3 fingers. 3, 2, 1. Bull kicked the door open. Inside, a man spun around, his eyes wide with shock. He was thin, maybe in his 40s, with greasy hair and a scraggly beard. And sitting on the floor behind him, tied with rope and gagged with a rag, was a small boy with blonde hair and tear-streaked cheeks. Charlie. "Don't move," Bull growled, his voice like gravel. The man raised his hands, but his eyes darted toward the window. Bull saw the shift in his body language and lunged forward just as the man bolted. Tank appeared in the doorway and tackled him to the ground before he could take 2 steps. The man hit the floor hard, the wind knocked out of him. Bull moved past them and dropped to his knees in front of Charlie. The boy was shaking, his eyes wide with terror. Bull gently removed the gag and started untying the ropes. "Hey, buddy," Bull said softly. "You're okay now. We're going to get you home." Charlie's lip trembled, and then he burst into tears, throwing his small arms around Bull's neck. Bull held him, his large hand cradling the back of the boy's head. "You're safe," Bull murmured. "You're safe now." Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder. The police had arrived. Officers poured into the warehouse, weapons drawn, shouting commands. They found Tank holding the suspect on the ground. The man's hands already zip-tied behind his back with a cable tie one of the bikers had produced. One of the officers, a detective named Harris, took in the scene, his eyes moving from the bikers to the child in Bull's arms to the man on the floor. He holstered his weapon and approached Bull. "You found him," Harris said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. Bull stood, still holding Charlie. "We did. This scum had him tied up." Harris nodded to his team, and 2 officers moved in to take the suspect into custody. The man was hauled to his feet, still dazed, and dragged out of the building. Harris looked at Bull. "How did you guys—" "Kid's sister came to our bar," Bull said simply. "We did what needed to be done." Harris studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. "Thank you, seriously. If you hadn't moved when you did—" He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. Bull shook his hand but said nothing. He didn't need thanks. He'd done what anyone should do. Outside, the parking lot was filled with flashing red and blue lights. Dozens of bikers stood in clusters, watching as the suspect was loaded into a police car. News vans were already pulling up, cameras rolling. Word had spread fast. Emma was standing near one of the patrol cars with Raven when she saw Bull emerge from the warehouse carrying her brother. Her face lit up, and she ran toward them, her legs moving faster than they ever had. "Charlie!" she screamed. Bull set the boy down, and Emma crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him and sobbing into his shoulder. Charlie clung to her, crying just as hard. "I'm sorry," Emma said over and over. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," Charlie whispered. "You found me." Bull watched them for a moment, then quietly stepped back, letting them have their reunion. Raven came up beside him. "Long night," she said. Bull nodded. "Yeah." A few minutes later, a car screeched to a halt at the edge of the lot. A woman jumped out, her face frantic. She spotted the kids and ran toward them, dropping to her knees and pulling them both into her arms. Their mother. "Oh, thank you," she sobbed. "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." She looked up at Bull and the other bikers, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, all of you." Bull just nodded. "Glad we could help." "Ma'am?" The scene outside the warehouse was surreal. The flashing lights from police cars painted everything in alternating shades of red and blue. Reporters swarmed the area, cameras pointed at the bikers, at the family, at the police hauling the suspect away. Detective Harris was giving a statement to the press, but Bull and his crew were already moving toward their bikes. They didn't want the attention. They never did. Emma's mother, Karen, was still on her knees, clutching her children. She looked up again at Bull, who was walking past. "Wait!" she called out. Bull stopped and turned. Karen stood, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know your name." "Bull," he said simply, "and you don't need to thank me. Just keep those kids close." "I will," Karen said, her voice breaking. "I swear I will." Emma stepped forward, wiping her eyes. "You saved him. You all did." Bull crouched down to her level. "You saved him, Emma. You were brave enough to ask for help. That's what mattered." Emma nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. Bull stood and gave her a nod, then walked back to his bike. Raven was already mounted, her helmet on. "We heading back?" "Yeah," Bull said, swinging his leg over his motorcycle. "Let's get out of here before the cameras eat us alive." The convoy of bikers started their engines, the rumble echoing through the industrial district. As they rolled out, people who had gathered to watch began clapping. It started with just a few, then spread. Soon, dozens of people were applauding, some cheering as the motorcycles passed by. Bull didn't acknowledge it. He kept his eyes on the road. But inside, he felt something. Pride, maybe, or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing they'd made a difference. The ride back to Rusty's bar was quieter than the ride out. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But there was also a sense of camaraderie, a shared understanding that they had done something good, something right. When they pulled into the parking lot, the bar was empty. Most of the patrons had gone home hours ago. Bull killed his engine and sat for a moment, staring at the front door. Then he dismounted and headed inside. A few of the others followed. Inside, the jukebox was off. The lights were dim. Bull walked behind the bar and poured himself a whiskey. He didn't say anything, just drank. Tank came in and sat on one of the stools. Quite a night. Yeah, Bull said, pouring another glass and sliding it across the bar to him. You think the kid's gonna be okay? Tank asked. Bull nodded. He's tough. He'll be okay. Gears walked in, pulling off his gloves. News vans are already calling this the Biker Brigade Rescue. It's all over social media. Bull grunted. Great, just what we need. Come on, man, Gears said with a grin. We're heroes. Embrace it. Bull shot him a look. We're not heroes. We just did what needed to be done. Raven came in last, shaking her head. My phone's been blowing up. People want interviews, news stations, podcasts, you name it. Bull sighed. Ignore them. This isn't about us. Try telling them that, Raven said, sitting down. The story's already got millions of views. Videos of the convoy. People talking about how 200 bikers dropped everything to find a missing kid. It's going viral. Bull finished his drink and set the glass down hard. Let it. As long as the kid's safe, I don't care. Over the next few days, the story exploded. News outlets across the country picked it up. Bikers rescue missing boy, the headlines read. 200 motorcyclists unite to save child from abduction. The footage of the convoy rolling through Millbrook played on loop. Clips of Bull carrying Charlie out of the warehouse, of Emma hugging her brother, of the bikers surrounding the suspect. It was everywhere. Bull tried to avoid it, but it was impossible. People recognized him on the street. Strangers thanked him. Some even wanted autographs. It was surreal and uncomfortable. He didn't want to be a celebrity. He just wanted to ride. But the attention wasn't all bad. Donations poured into the Iron Wolves' charity fund, which supported veterans and struggling families. Other motorcycle clubs reached out, wanting to organize similar search and rescue networks. The story had inspired people. And for Karen and her kids, life was slowly returning to normal. Charlie was seeing a counselor to help him process what had happened, but he was resilient. Emma stayed close to him, more protective than ever. Karen made sure they were never out of her sight. A week after the rescue, Karen showed up at Rusty's bar. Bull was wiping down the counter when she walked in. He looked up, surprised. Ma'am, he said, everything okay? Karen nodded. I wanted to bring you this. She held out a small envelope. Bull wiped his hands on a towel and took it. Inside was a handwritten note from Emma and Charlie. The letters were shaky and uneven, clearly written by children. It read, "Thank you for saving me. You are my hero. Charlie, thank you for helping my brother. You are the bravest people I know." Emma Bull stared at the note for a long moment. His throat tightened. Karen's voice was soft. They wanted you to have that. They talk about you guys every day. You gave them hope when I didn't think we'd ever have it again. Bull folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Tell them I said they're brave too. Karen smiled, tears in her eyes. I will. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Bull, if you ever need anything at all, you call me. I owe you everything. Bull nodded. Take care of those kids. I will, Karen said, and then she was gone. Bull stood there for a moment, alone in the quiet bar. Then he pulled the note out of his pocket and read it again. He didn't smile, but something in his chest felt lighter. The weeks following the rescue brought a strange new reality for Bull and the Iron Wolves. What had started as a simple act of doing the right thing had snowballed into something much bigger. The story refused to die down. Local news became national news. National news became international news. Videos of the convoy had been shared millions of times. Memes were made. Tribute posts flooded social media. The phrase biker brigade became a rallying cry for communities looking for hope. Bull hated the attention, but he couldn't deny the impact it was having. The Iron Wolves' charity received more donations in 2 weeks than they'd seen in 5 years. Families who needed help were reaching out. Veterans who had been struggling found support, and other motorcycle clubs across the country were starting to organize similar rapid response networks for missing children in community emergencies. One afternoon, Bull was in the garage behind the bar, working on his bike, when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. "Yeah? Is this Marcus Thompson?" a woman's voice asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Angela Torres. I'm a producer for Good Morning America. We'd love to have you and your crew on the show to talk about the rescue." Bull wiped his hands on a rag. "Not interested. Please, just hear me out. This story has touched millions of people. It's about more than just the rescue. It's about community, about people stepping up when others need help. We think—" "I said no," Bull interrupted. "We're not doing interviews. We're not doing TV. We did what we did because it was the right thing to do. That's it." There was a pause on the other end. "I understand, but you should know people are inspired by this. You've given people hope." Bull sighed. "Good. Then tell them to go help someone in their own community. That's all the inspiration they need." He hung up, but the requests kept coming. Podcasts, documentaries, book deals. Bull turned them all down. The rest of the crew took his lead. They weren't interested in fame. They were bikers. They lived by their own code, and part of that code was humility. Still, the story had consequences, positive ones. A mother in Texas called the Iron Wolves after her teenage daughter went missing. Bull put her in touch with a local motorcycle club in her area, and within hours they had organized a search. The girl was found safe that same night. Another call came from Ohio, then another from California. Soon the Iron Wolves had become a hub for coordinating rapid response searches across the country. Bull found himself on the phone more than he ever wanted to be, but he couldn't say no, not when kids were at stake. One evening, Detective Harris stopped by the bar. He found Bull at his usual spot, nursing a drink. "Mind if I sit?" Harris asked. Bull gestured to the stool next to him. "Free country." Harris sat down and ordered a beer. They sat in silence for a moment, then Harris spoke. "You know, I've been a cop for 23 years, seen a lot of things. But what you and your crew did, that was something else." Bull shrugged. "We just did what needed to be done." "Yeah, but most people wouldn't have," Harris said. "Most people would have called 911 and waited. You didn't wait. You acted. And because of that, a kid's alive." Bull didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. Harris took a sip of his beer. "We got the full story out of the suspect. Guy's name is Raymond Kowalski. He's got a record. Priors for stalking, attempted kidnapping. He'd been watching the park for weeks, waiting for an opportunity." Bull's jaw tightened. "He say why?" Harris shook his head. "Claims he wasn't going to hurt the kid. Said he was just lonely, wanted a family. But we both know that's bull. If you guys hadn't found him when you did—" He trailed off. Bull stared at his drink. "How long's he going away for?" "With the evidence and the charges? Life, probably." "No parole." "Good." They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Harris stood and dropped a 20 on the bar. "Thanks for what you did." "Really?" Bull nodded. "Anytime." As Harris left, Raven came in. She slid onto the stool Harris had vacated and looked at Bull. "You okay?" "Yeah," Bull said. "Just tired." "You look it," Raven said. "But hey, I got something that might cheer you up." "Doubt it." Raven pulled out her phone and turned it toward him. On the screen was a photo. It showed Emma and Charlie at a park, smiling, holding ice cream cones. Karen had posted it on social media with a caption that read, "My babies are happy and safe, thanks to some incredible people. Forever grateful." Bull stared at the photo for a long moment. Then he nodded. "That's good." Raven pocketed her phone. "You ever think about what we do, Bull? I mean, really think about it." "What do you mean?" We ride, we drink, we live free, but every now and then, we do something that actually matters, something that changes someone's life. That's rare, man. Most people never get to do that. Bull considered her words. Maybe, but it shouldn't be rare. Everyone should be looking out for each other. Raven smiled. Yeah, but they're not. So I guess it's up to guys like us. Bull raised his glass. To guys like us. Raven clinked her bottle against his glass. And to kids like Charlie. They drank in silence, the weight of the past weeks settling over them. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The motorcycles sat in neat rows, gleaming under the fading light. Bull set his glass down and stood. I'm heading out for a ride. You coming? Raven grinned. Always. They walked outside, the cool evening air washing over them. Bull mounted his bike, and Raven did the same. Within moments, the engines roared to life, and they rolled out onto the open road, leaving the noise and the attention behind. Out there, it was just the road, the wind, and the freedom they'd always lived for. The months that followed were a blur of activity. The story of the rescue slowly faded from the headlines, replaced by the next viral sensation, the next tragedy, the next moment of fleeting internet fame. But for Bull and the Iron Wolves, life had changed in quieter, more lasting ways. The bar still stood at the edge of Main Street, motorcycles still lined the parking lot, and the jukebox still played classic rock. But now there was something different in the air, a sense of purpose. A reminder that they were more than just a group of people who liked to ride. They were a community, and communities took care of their own. Bull had finally agreed to one interview, but only after weeks of pestering from a local journalist who promised to keep it simple and respectful. The piece ran in the town's newspaper, a quiet, honest article that focused less on heroism and more on the power of people showing up when others need help. Bull liked it. It didn't make them out to be superheroes. It just told the truth. One cold November evening, Bull was closing up the bar when his phone buzzed. It was a text from Karen. Can we stop by tomorrow? The kids want to see you. Bull smiled and typed back. Sure. Anytime. The next afternoon, Karen pulled up to the bar with Emma and Charlie in the back seat. Bull was out front, working on a bike that had been giving him trouble. He looked up when he heard the car door slam. Hey, Bull said, wiping grease off his hands. Hey, Karen said with a smile. Hope we're not interrupting. Not at all. Emma and Charlie climbed out of the car. Emma was taller now, or maybe she just looked older, more confident. Charlie was still small, but there was a brightness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hi, Bull, Emma said shyly. Hey, kiddo, Bull replied. How you been? Good, she said. School's good. Charlie's good too. Charlie stepped forward and held out a piece of paper. I made this for you. Bull took the paper and looked at it. It was a drawing done in crayon. It showed a bunch of motorcycles and stick figures with big smiles. At the top, in uneven letters, it read, Thank you, Bull and the Iron Wolves. Bull's chest tightened. He crouched down to Charlie's level. This is really good, buddy. I'm going to hang this up inside. Charlie beamed. Really? Really? Karen watched the exchange, her eyes glistening. They talk about you all the time. You're like, they're heroes. Bull stood and shook his head. I'm just a guy who rides a bike. You're more than that, Karen said softly. You gave us our lives back. Bull didn't know what to say to that. He never did, so he just nodded. Emma looked around. Are the other bikers here? Some of them, Bull said. Want to meet them? Emma's face lit up. Yeah. Bull led them inside where a handful of the crew were hanging out. Raven was at the bar, Gears was playing pool, and Tank was watching a game on the TV mounted in the corner. When they saw Emma and Charlie, they all stopped what they were doing. Well, well, Raven said with a grin. Look who it is. Charlie waved shyly. Emma smiled. Raven came over and knelt down. You doing okay, little man? Charlie nodded. Yeah, Bull saved me. We all did, Raven said. But mostly you. You were brave. Charlie's chest puffed up a little at that. Gears walked over and ruffled Emma's hair. And you? Still keeping an eye on your brother? Emma nodded seriously. Always. Good, Weishum, Gears said. That's what big sisters do. They spent the next hour at the bar. Karen sat with Bull talking about life, about how the kids were healing, about the changes in the town since the story broke. Bull mostly listened. He wasn't much for talking, but he liked hearing that things were getting better. Before they left, Charlie tugged on Bull's sleeve. Can I see your motorcycle? Bull looked at Karen, who nodded. Sure, buddy, come on. Outside, Bull led Charlie to his bike. It was a massive machine, black and chrome, with the Iron Wolves emblem painted on the tank. Charlie's eyes went wide. Whoa, he breathed. Want to sit on it? Bull asked. Charlie's head whipped around to his mom. Can I? Karen smiled. Go ahead. Bull lifted Charlie onto the seat. The boy's legs barely reached the foot pegs, but he gripped the handlebars like he was ready to ride. Bull stepped back and crossed his arms, watching. I'm going to get a motorcycle when I grow up, Charlie said seriously. Bull chuckled. Yeah? What kind? A big one, like yours. Good choice. Emma came over and looked at her brother on the bike. Can I sit on it too? Bull nodded. Sure. He lifted Emma up behind Charlie, and they both grinned, pretending to rev the engine. Karen pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. She showed it to Bull. Mind if I keep this? She asked. It's your picture, Bull said. I know, Karen said, but it means a lot to us. All of this does. Bull looked at the photo. 2 kids smiling, sitting on his bike. He nodded. Yeah, keep it. After they left, Bull went back inside. Raven was still at the bar. That was nice, she said. Bull grunted. Yeah. You ever think about having kids? Raven asked. Bull snorted. Absolutely not. I can barely take care of myself. Raven laughed. Fair enough. But as Bull sat down and poured himself a drink, he thought about the drawing Charlie had made, now taped to the wall behind the bar. He thought about Emma's smile, about the way Charlie had gripped those handlebars like he was ready to take on the world. Maybe he didn't need kids of his own. Maybe this was enough. As winter approached, life in Millbrook settled back into its familiar rhythms. The tourists who had flocked to the town after the viral story had moved on. The reporters had stopped calling. The world had turned its attention elsewhere. But for those who had lived through it, the memory remained fresh. It was a reminder that sometimes the people you least expect can be the ones who show up when it matters most. Bull and the Iron Wolves continued their routines. They rode. They drank. They worked on their bikes. But there was something different now. A quiet pride. A sense that they had done something that would outlast the headlines. One Saturday morning, Bull received a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Yeah? Is this Marcus Thompson? A man's voice asked. Who's asking? My name is Robert Chen. I'm calling from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We've been following the story of what you and your motorcycle club did in Millbrook. Bull leaned back in his chair. Okay. We'd like to partner with you, Robert said. We're working on a program to create rapid response networks for missing children across the country. Motorcycle clubs, community groups, volunteers. People who can mobilize quickly when law enforcement is stretched thin. We think your group could be a model for that. Bull was quiet for a moment. What does that mean? It means training, coordination, resources. We'd help you formalize what you already do. Make it easier for other communities to replicate it. You wouldn't have to do interviews or be in the spotlight. This would be about action, not publicity. Bull considered it. Let me talk to my crew. I'll get back to you. Take your time, Robert said, but I hope you'll consider it. What you did saved a life. Imagine if that kind of response was available everywhere. That night, Bull called a meeting at the bar. The core members of the Iron Wolves gathered around a table in the back. Bull laid out the proposal. So basically, they want to turn us into an official search and rescue network, Raven said. Something like that, Bull replied. But it wouldn't just be us. It'd be clubs all over the country, coordinated, trained. Tank leaned back in his chair. I don't know, man. I like what we do, but the moment it becomes official, it starts feeling like a job. It's not a job, Bull said. It's just making sure more kids get found, more families get their loved ones back. Gears nodded. I'm in. We've already been doing it anyway. Might as well make it count. Raven looked around the table. I think we all know what the right answer is. We just have to decide if we're ready for it. Bull met her eyes. I'm ready, but this is a crew decision. If anyone's not on board, we don't do it. One by one, the members spoke up. Some were hesitant, worried about the spotlight, about losing their freedom. But in the end, they all agreed. They'd do it, not for the recognition, not for the fame, but because it was the right thing to do. Bull called Robert back the next day. We're in. Over the next few months, the Iron Wolves underwent training with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They learned about search patterns, communication protocols, working with law enforcement, and trauma-informed approaches to interacting with families. It was more structured than they were used to, but they adapted. And they weren't alone. Motorcycle clubs from all over the country signed on. The Steel Riders in Nevada, the Thunder Road Brotherhood in Tennessee, the Desert Hawks in Arizona. Slowly, a network formed. When a child went missing, the alert went out, and clubs in the area mobilized. Response times dropped. Recovery rates went up. The media caught wind of it, of course. Biker Rescue Network saves lives across the nation. The headlines read. But this time, Bull and the others stayed out of the spotlight. They let the work speak for itself. One cold February night, Bull got a call from a club in Wyoming. A 6-year-old girl had wandered away from a campsite in the mountains. Temperatures were dropping fast. The local sheriff's department was overwhelmed. They needed help. Bull mobilized the nearest clubs. Within 2 hours, over 100 bikers converged on the area. They spread out across the mountain using thermal imaging equipment provided by the National Center. 4 hours later, they found her, huddled under a tree, hypothermic but alive. She was airlifted to a hospital and made a full recovery. Karen saw the story on the news and texted Bull. You're doing it again. Thank you for being who you are. Bull didn't reply. He didn't need to. Back in Millbrook, life went on. Emma and Charlie were thriving. Emma had started volunteering at a local community center, helping other kids who had experienced trauma. Charlie was in kindergarten now, a bright, curious kid who loved drawing and playing outside. He still talked about motorcycles. One spring afternoon, Karen brought the kids to the bar again. Bull was outside as usual working on a bike. Hey, Karen called out. Bull looked up and smiled. Hey, you guys doing good? We are, Karen said. Actually, we wanted to give you something. She handed him a small wooden box. Bull opened it. Inside was a plaque. It read, To Bull and the Iron Wolves, for showing us that heroes don't always wear capes. They ride motorcycles. With love and gratitude, Emma, Charlie, and Karen. Bull stared at it for a long time. His throat felt tight. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, we did, Karen said. You gave us our family back. That's everything. Emma stepped forward. And I want to be like you when I grow up. Someone who helps people. Bull crouched down to her level. You already are, kid. Keep it up. Charlie tugged on Bull's arm. Can we ride motorcycles together someday? Bull grinned. When you're old enough, yeah, I'll teach you myself. As they drove away, Bull stood in the parking lot, holding the plaque. Raven came outside and stood next to him. Not bad for a bunch of bikers, huh? She said. Bull looked at the plaque, then at the rows of motorcycles in the lot. Yeah, not bad at all. Spring turned to summer and the work continued. Bull and the Iron Wolves had become part of something much larger than themselves. A nationwide network that had saved dozens of children and helped reunite countless families. But despite the growth and the recognition from organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Bull remained grounded. He still ran the bar, still worked on bikes, still took long rides through the mountains when he needed to clear his head. One evening in late June, Bull was sitting outside the bar, watching the sun dip below the horizon, when a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. A man in a suit stepped out, looking slightly out of place among the motorcycles and leather. Bull watched him approach. Help you, the man smiled. Marcus Thompson? That's me. My name is Daniel Garrett. I'm with the governor's office. The governor would like to recognize you and your crew for your work with missing children. There's going to be a ceremony next month. An award. Bull sighed. Not interested. I understand, Daniel said, but this isn't just about recognition. It's about bringing attention to the work. The more people know about the network, the more volunteers we get, the more lives we save. Bull considered this. I don't do ceremonies, but if it helps get more people involved, I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking, Daniel said. He handed Bull a business card. Let me know. Bull took the card and watched the man drive away. He stared at it for a moment, then tucked it into his pocket. Raven came outside. Who was that? Governor's office. They want to give us an award. Raven raised an eyebrow. And I said I'd think about it. You should do it, Raven said. Not for us, but for the kids, the families. The people who need to know this kind of thing exists. Bull nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe. A week later, Bull called Daniel Garrett back. I'll do it, but only if the whole crew is included. This isn't about me, it's about all of us. Absolutely, Daniel said. We'll make sure everyone is recognized. The ceremony took place on a hot July afternoon at the state capitol. Bull and the core members of the Iron Wolves stood on a stage in front of a crowd of reporters, families, and community members. The governor gave a speech about courage, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about the power of community. Bull stood off to the side, uncomfortable in a button-down shirt, wishing he was anywhere else. But when the governor called him forward to receive the award, he walked up and shook the man's hand. Thank you for what you've done, the governor said. Bull nodded. Just doing what's right. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Bull held the plaque for a moment, then stepped back, letting the rest of his crew join him. They stood together, a united front, and for a moment, Bull felt something close to pride. After the ceremony, families approached them, parents whose children had been found by the network, kids who wanted to thank them. One mother, tears streaming down her face, grabbed Bull's hand and held it tight. You saved my son, she said. He was missing for 3 days. Your people found him. I don't know how to thank you. Bull squeezed her hand gently. You just did. As the crowd dispersed, Bull and the crew walked back to their bikes. They mounted up and rode out, the roar of their engines echoing through the Capitol grounds. On the ride back to Millbrook, Bull felt the weight of the day lift. The ceremony was done. The award was given. Now they could go back to what they did best: riding, living, helping when they were needed. When they pulled into the parking lot of Rusty's bar, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Bull killed his engine and sat for a moment, looking at the bar, at the bikes, at the people he called family. Raven pulled up next to him. That wasn't so bad, Bull grunted. Still hate ceremonies. Raven laughed. Yeah, I know. They walked inside and the jukebox started playing. Someone poured drinks. Someone else cracked a joke. The world outside might have seen them as heroes, but inside these walls, they were just a crew. Just people who looked out for each other. Bull sat at the bar, his usual spot, and raised his glass. To the road. The others raised their glasses. To the road. Over the next few months, the network continued to grow. More clubs joined. More children were found. More families were reunited. The Iron Wolves became a model for how communities could come together in times of crisis. But Bull never forgot where it all started. A little girl, terrified and crying, bursting through the door of a bar and asking for help. That moment had changed everything. It had shown him that the world wasn't just about riding free and living on your own terms. It was also about being there for people when they needed you most. One autumn evening, Bull received a letter in the mail. It was from Emma. She was in middle school now, doing well, still helping other kids through a peer counseling program. The letter was short and simple. Dear Bull, I just wanted to say thank you again. I know I've said it before, but I don't think I'll ever stop being grateful. You and your friends saved my brother's life. You showed me what it means to be brave and to help people. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not a biker, sorry, but someone who shows up when people need help. Someone who makes a difference. Thank you for everything. Love, Emma. Bull read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his wallet, right next to the drawing Charlie had made all those months ago. Raven came in and sat next to him. "What's that?" Bull handed her the letter. She read it and smiled. "That's a good kid." "Yeah," Bull said. "She is." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the past year settling over them. Then Raven raised her bottle. "To kids like Emma," she said. Bull clinked his glass against her bottle. "And to never forgetting why we do this." The leaves had begun to turn, painting the town of Millbrook in shades of amber and gold. It was Bull's favorite time of year, when the air turned crisp and the roads opened up for long, peaceful rides. But peace, he'd learned, was fleeting. There was always someone who needed help, always another call, another missing child, another family in crisis. The phone rang one October evening while Bull was locking up the bar. He glanced at the caller ID. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he'd learned long ago not to ignore unknown calls. Too many of them turned out to be important. "Yeah," he answered. "Is this Bull?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded young, shaken. "It is. Who's this?" "My name is Jessica. I'm calling from Portland. I I saw the story about you and your crew, about how you found that little boy. I need help. My daughter's missing." Bull's chest tightened. "How long?" "Since this morning. She's 12. She left for school and never came back. The police are looking, but—" Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to do." Bull grabbed a pen and paper. "What's her name?" "Lily. Lily Martinez." "Okay, Jessica. I need you to stay calm. Give me your address and a description. I'll get people on this." Jessica rattled off the details, her voice shaking. Bull wrote everything down, asked a few more questions, then ended the call. He immediately dialed the local chapter in Portland, the Steel Riders, and filled them in. Within 20 minutes, they were mobilizing. Bull didn't sleep that night. He stayed up, coordinating with the clubs in Oregon, checking in every hour. The search went on through the night, dozens of bikers combing the city, talking to locals, checking security footage, following leads. At 4:37 a.m., Bull's phone rang. It was the president of the Steel Riders, a man named Axel. "We found her," Axel said. Bull exhaled, relief flooding through him. "She okay?" "Shaken up, but yeah. She'd been coerced by an older boyfriend. He'd convinced her to run away with him. We found them at a motel on the outskirts of town. Cops took him into custody. She's with her mom now." Bull closed his eyes. "Good work." "Couldn't have done it without the network," Axel said. "This thing you started, Bull, it's saving lives." "It's not about me," Bull said. "It's about all of us." "Yeah, but you're the one who made it happen. Don't forget that." After the call, Bull sat in the dark, staring out the window. The sky was beginning to lighten, the first hints of dawn creeping over the horizon. He thought about Jessica, about the moment she'd get her daughter back. He thought about Lily, about how close she'd come to something much worse. And he thought about all the other kids out there, the ones who hadn't been found yet, the ones who were still waiting for someone to show up. The work was never done, but that was okay. Bull didn't mind. This was what he was meant to do. Over the next year, the network saved more than 50 children. Some were runaways, some were abductions. Some were lost in the wilderness or trapped in dangerous situations. But in every case, the bikers showed up. They searched. They found. They brought kids home. The media continued to cover the stories, but Bull stayed out of the spotlight. He let the work speak for itself. The only interviews he gave were to organizations that wanted to learn how to replicate the model. He spoke at conferences not because he wanted to, but because he knew it would help more kids. One chilly November evening, Bull was at the bar when Karen and the kids walked in. Charlie was taller now, his blonde hair shaggy and falling into his eyes. Emma had braces and was wearing a hoodie with her school's name on it. They looked happy, healthy. "Hey," Bull said, standing up. "What brings you by?" "We were in the neighborhood," Karen said with a smile. "Thought we'd stop in and say hi." Charlie ran up to Bull and hugged him. Bull patted his back awkwardly. He still wasn't great at this kind of thing, but he was getting better. "How you doing, buddy?" Bull asked. "Good," Charlie said. "I'm in second grade now, and I joined soccer." "That's great," Bull said. Emma hung back, a little shy. She'd grown up so much since that night. Bull could see the strength in her now, the resilience. "How about you?" Bull asked her. I'm good, Emma said. I'm helping with a peer mentorship program at school, talking to kids who are going through tough stuff. Bull nodded. That's good. Real good. Karen stepped forward. I wanted to tell you something. We're moving. Bull's expression shifted. Yeah? Where to? California, Karen said. I got a job offer. Better pay, better schools for the kids. It's a fresh start. Bull nodded slowly. That's good. You guys deserve that. We do, Karen said, but we wanted to say goodbye. And thank you. One more time. Bull looked at the three of them, this family he'd helped save, and felt something tighten in his chest. You don't need to thank me anymore, Bull said. You just go live your lives. Be happy. That's enough. Karen's eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward and hugged him. Bull stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, wrapping one arm around her. You saved us, Karen whispered. I'll never forget that. Bull didn't say anything. He just nodded. Emma and Charlie hugged him too, and then they were gone, walking out into the cool evening air, heading toward a new life. Bull stood in the doorway, watching them drive away. Raven came up beside him. You okay? She asked. Yeah, Bull said. I'm good. Raven smiled. You're a big softy, you know that? Bull grunted. Shut up. But he smiled too. As the taillights disappeared into the distance, Bull turned and walked back inside. The jukebox was playing. His crew was laughing. The bar was warm and alive with the hum of conversation. And somewhere out there, another family was waiting for help. Another child was waiting to be found. Bull poured himself a drink and raised it to the empty room. To the road, he said quietly, and to everyone still out there waiting. Winter came hard that year, bringing snow and ice that blanketed Millbrook in white. The bar was quieter during those months. Fewer people ventured out, and the bikers mostly stayed close to home, maintaining their machines and waiting for the thaw. But the network didn't stop. Calls still came in. Kids still went missing. And the Iron Wolves, along with dozens of other clubs across the country, still answered. Bull had become something of a legend in the motorcycle community, though he hated the title. People looked up to him, sought his advice, wanted to shake his hand. He tolerated it, but only because it meant more people were getting involved, more eyes on the streets, more hands ready to help. One snowy evening in December, Bull was alone in the bar, doing paperwork, when the door opened. A blast of cold air swept in, followed by a figure bundled in a heavy coat and scarf. Bull looked up. We're closed, he said. The figure pulled down the scarf, revealing a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. She had dark hair and sharp eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Are you Bull? She asked. Depends who's asking. My name is Mia, she said. I was one of the kids you saved 3 years ago in Ohio. Bull set down his pen and studied her. I don't remember every case. I know, Mia said, but I remember you. I was 14. I'd run away from home because my stepdad was not a good guy. I was living on the streets and some guy picked me up, said he'd take care of me. Turned out he was trafficking girls. Bull's jaw tightened. Your network got a tip, Mia continued. Bikers in Cleveland tracked me down, got me out, saved my life. Bull nodded slowly. Glad you're okay. I am, Mia said, and I wanted to thank you, but I also wanted to ask you something. What's that? I want to help. I want to be part of this. I know what it's like to be lost, to be scared. I want to make sure other kids don't go through what I did. Bull leaned back in his chair. You ride? Mia smiled. Not yet. But I can learn. Bull studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, you want in? You're in. But this isn't easy work. It's long hours, hard rides, and a lot of heartbreak. You sure you're ready for that? I'm sure, Mia said. Good, Bull said. Come back in the spring. We'll get you set up. Mia smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Thank you. After she left, Bull sat alone in the quiet bar, staring at the snow falling outside. He thought about all the kids they'd saved, all the lives they'd changed, and he thought about the ones they hadn't found, the ones who were still out there waiting. The work was never done. But as long as there were people like Mia, people willing to stand up and help, there was hope. Spring came slowly, but when it did, It brought new life to Millbrook. The snow melted. The flowers bloomed, and the roads opened up again. Mia returned as promised, and Raven took her under her wing, teaching her how to ride, how to handle a bike, how to be part of the crew. Bull watched from a distance, proud in his own quiet way. The network was growing, evolving, becoming something even bigger than he'd imagined. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth. People cared. When given the chance, when shown the way, people wanted to help. One warm April evening, Bull was out for a ride when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Axel in Portland. Another one found, 7-year-old boy, lost in the woods for 2 days. Your network saved him. Thought you'd want to know. Bull read the message, then tucked his phone away. He twisted the throttle, and his bike roared forward, the wind rushing past him as he flew down the open road. He didn't need to respond. Axel knew. They all knew. This was why they did it. This was what mattered. As the sun set behind the mountains, Bull rode on, the road stretching out before him like a promise that no matter what, no matter how hard things got, there would always be someone willing to show up, someone willing to help. And as long as he had breath in his lungs and a bike beneath him, Bull would be one of those people. Because that's what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. That's what it meant to be an Iron Wolf. The phone rang again. Bull pulled over and answered. Yeah? Bull, it's Harris. We got a situation. Missing girl in Vermont, 12 years old, abducted from her front yard 2 hours ago. Local PD is on it, but they're asking for help. Bull didn't hesitate. I'll make the calls, get the word out. We'll have people there within the hour. Thanks, Bull. Bull hung up and immediately started dialing. Within minutes, the network was mobilized. Bikers from New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York were heading toward Vermont. The machine was in motion. Bull turned his bike around and headed back toward Millbrook. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But that was okay, because somewhere out there, a little girl was waiting to be found, and Bull and his crew would make absolutely sure she was. As he rode through the night, the stars above and the road below, Bull thought about all the families they'd helped, all the lives they'd touched. He thought about Emma and Charlie, about Karen, about Mia. He thought about every single kid who'd been given a second chance because a group of bikers decided to show up. And he smiled, because in a world that often felt cold and uncaring, they had proven something important, that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. And sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. The call about the missing girl in Vermont came through with an urgency that Bull recognized all too well. Her name was Sophie Grant, 12 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, wearing a yellow raincoat when she was last seen. The abduction had happened in broad daylight, a white van pulling up to the curb, a man grabbing her before anyone could react. A neighbor had caught the license plate, but the van had been reported stolen. Bull coordinated from the road, his phone pressed to his ear as he navigated the winding highways toward Vermont. He spoke to club presidents, sheriffs, local volunteers. The machine they'd built over the past few years was well-oiled now, capable of mobilizing hundreds of people in a matter of minutes. By the time Bull reached the small town of Fairfield, Vermont, the parking lot of the local police station looked like a motorcycle rally. Rows of bikes stretched across the asphalt, their riders gathered in clusters, waiting for instructions. Sheriff Tom Brennan, a grizzled man in his 50s, stood at the center of the crowd, a map spread out on the hood of his patrol car. He looked up as Bull approached. "You must be Bull," Brennan said. "That's me." Brennan extended his hand. "Thanks for coming. We've got every officer in the county out looking, but we need more eyes. This guy's got a head start." Bull nodded. "What do we know?" Brennan pointed to the map. "Van was spotted heading north on Route 7 about 2 hours ago. We've got roadblocks set up, but there are a lot of back roads. If he knows the area, he could slip through." Bull studied the map. "We'll cover the back roads. Split into teams, sweep every route. If he's out there, we'll find him." Brennan nodded. "Appreciate it." The bikers fanned out, each team assigned a section of the county. Bull led one group, Raven another, and Axel, who'd driven up from Portland, took a third. They moved quickly, engines roaring as they tore down the rural roads, eyes scanning for any sign of the white van. Hours passed. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields and forests. Bull's radio crackled. "Bull, this is Raven. We got something. Old barn off Route 12. White van parked behind it. Plates match." Bull's heart pounded. "Don't approach. Wait for me." He twisted the throttle and sped toward Raven's location. Within minutes, he arrived, followed by a dozen other bikers. They parked their bikes a safe distance away and approached on foot, silent and deliberate. The barn was old, its wood weathered and gray. The white van sat behind it, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. Bull signaled for the others to spread out, surrounding the structure. He moved to the barn door and listened. Voices. A man's voice, low and harsh, and then faintly, a child's cry. Bull's blood went cold. He radioed Sheriff Brennan. "We found her. Old barn off Route 12. Suspect is inside. We're going in." Brennan's voice crackled back. "Negative. Wait for us. We're 5 minutes out." Bull looked at the barn, at the door. 5 minutes could be a lifetime. "We don't have 5 minutes," Bull said. He motioned to tank and gears. They nodded. Bull gripped the door handle and, on his signal, yanked it open. Inside, the barn was dim, lit only by a single lantern. A man stood near the back, his hand gripping the arm of a young girl. Sophie. Her face was streaked with tears, her yellow raincoat torn. The man spun around, his eyes wide with panic. "Get out!" Bull stepped inside, his presence filling the space. "Let her go!" The man pulled Sophie closer, his hand moving to his belt. Bull saw the glint of a knife. "I said get out!" the man screamed. Bull didn't move. Behind him, tank and gears spread out, flanking the man. Raven appeared in the doorway, her hand resting on her hip, where Bull knew she kept a blade of her own. "You're surrounded," Bull said, his voice low and calm. "Let the girl go, and we'll wait for the cops. Make this harder, and it won't end well for you." The man's eyes darted around the barn, looking for an escape. There was none. Slowly, his grip on Sophie loosened. The knife clattered to the ground. "Okay," he said, his voice shaking. "Okay." Tank moved in and grabbed the man, forcing him to the ground. Gears secured him with zip ties. Bull knelt down in front of Sophie. "Hey," he said gently. "You're okay now. We're going to get you home." Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her face. Bull picked her up, and she buried her face in his shoulder. Outside, the sound of sirens filled the air. Sheriff Brennan and his team arrived, taking the suspect into custody. Bull handed Sophie over to a waiting paramedic, who wrapped her in a blanket and began checking her over. Brennan approached Bull, shaking his head. "You didn't wait." "No," Bull said. "We didn't." Brennan stared at him for a moment, then nodded. "Good thing you didn't. Thank you." Bull didn't respond. He just walked back to his bike, mounted it, and rode off into the night. Sophie was reunited with her parents later that evening. The footage of the moment played on every news channel in the country. A mother and father collapsing to their knees, holding their daughter, sobbing with relief. The bikers standing in the background, silent and unobtrusive, already fading into the shadows. But the world noticed. The story went viral again. "Biker Network saves another child," the headlines read. Donations poured in. More clubs joined the network. More volunteers signed up. Bull watched it all from a distance, the same way he always did. He didn't care about the headlines. He cared about Sophie, about Emma, about Charlie, about every kid who'd been given a second chance. That was all that mattered. Back in Millbrook, life continued. The bar remained a haven for the crew, a place where they could gather, share stories, and plan the next ride. And every time the phone rang, every time a call came in about a missing child, they answered. Because that's what they did. That's who they were, and they would never stop. The rescue of Sophie Grant became another milestone in the growing legend of the Biker Network. News outlets, podcasts, and online forums couldn't get enough of the story. But for Bull and his crew, it was just another day. Another child saved. Another family made whole again. What they didn't anticipate was the ripple effect. Within a week of Sophie's rescue, over 200 new motorcycle clubs had reached out, wanting to join the network. Training sessions were scheduled. Protocols were refined. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children expanded their partnership, providing even more resources, equipment, and coordination support. Bull found himself in meetings more often than he liked, but he accepted it as a necessary part of the work. He sat through conference calls with law enforcement agencies, spoke at training seminars, and helped onboard new clubs into the network. It was exhausting, but he knew it was worth it. One afternoon, Bull received a call from a woman named Dr. Helen Park, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. She had been following the network's work and wanted to collaborate. "I've been studying the cases your network has handled," Dr. Park said. "The speed of your response, the way you engage with families, it's remarkable. But I think we can do more." Bull leaned back in his chair. "What do you mean?" "Right now, you find the children and bring them home. But the trauma doesn't end there. These kids need support, therapy, resources to help them heal. I'd like to integrate psychological support into the network, have trained counselors available immediately after a rescue." Bull considered this. It made sense. He'd seen it in Charlie, in Emma, in Sophie. The fear didn't just disappear when they were found. It lingered. "All right," Bull said. "Let's do it." Over the next few months, Dr. Park and her team worked with the network to establish a support system. Every rescue now included a trained trauma counselor who could provide immediate care to the child and the family. Follow-up resources were provided, including therapy sessions, support groups, and educational materials. The impact was immediate. Families reported feeling more supported, more hopeful. Kids recovered faster, with fewer long-term psychological effects. The network wasn't just finding children anymore. They were helping them heal. Bull watched it all with quiet pride. This was bigger than he'd ever imagined. What had started as a simple act of helping a little girl find her brother had grown into a nationwide movement, a network that saved lives and gave hope to families in their darkest moments. But with growth came challenges. Not everyone was supportive of the network. Some law enforcement agencies felt the bikers were overstepping, interfering with official investigations. There were clashes, misunderstandings, and moments of friction. Bull worked hard to smooth things over, emphasizing that the network wasn't there to replace the police, but to support them. One particularly heated meeting with a police chief in Ohio tested Bull's patience. "You people are vigilantes," the chief said, his face red with anger. "You have no training, no authority. You're putting yourselves and the kids at risk." Bull kept his voice calm. "We're not vigilantes. We're volunteers. We work with law enforcement, not against them. And as for training, every member of this network has been trained by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We know what we're doing." The chief crossed his arms. "I don't want your people in my county." Bull stood. "That's your choice. But when a kid goes missing, and your department is stretched thin, and a family is begging for help, we'll be there, whether you like it or not." He walked out. Raven was waiting outside. "How'd it go?" "About as well as you'd expect," Bull said. "He'll come around," Raven said. "They always do." And she was right. 2 months later, that same police chief called Bull, asking for help with a missing teenager. The network mobilized, and the teen was found within hours. The chief never apologized, but he didn't need to. His call was enough. As the network continued to grow, Bull started thinking about the future. He wasn't getting any younger, and the work was demanding. He needed to make sure the network would continue long after he was gone. He called a meeting with the core members of the Iron Wolves, along with leaders from other major clubs in the network. "We need to talk about succession," Bull said. "This thing we've built, it's bigger than any one of us. We need to make sure it lasts." Raven nodded. "You thinking about stepping down?" "Not yet," Bull said, "but eventually. And when I do, I want to make sure there's a plan in place." Over the next few hours, they discussed leadership structures, training programs, and long-term sustainability. They agreed to establish a council made up of representatives from each region to oversee the network. Decisions would be made collectively, ensuring no single person had too much power. It was a good plan, a smart plan, and it gave Bull peace of mind. That summer, Bull took a rare vacation. He rode out to the West Coast, stopping at small towns and wide-open landscapes, breathing in the freedom of the road. He visited clubs along the way, meeting the people who had become part of the network, hearing their stories, seeing the impact they were making. In a small diner in Montana, a waitress recognized him. "You're Bull, right? From the Biker Rescue Network?" Bull nodded. "My nephew was one of the kids you saved last year in Idaho. He's doing great now. I just wanted to say thank you." Bull smiled. "Glad to hear it." As he rode on, Bull thought about all the people he'd met, all the lives that had been touched by the network. It was overwhelming in a good way. He pulled over at a lookout point, the mountains stretching out before him, and sat on his bike, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He thought about Emma and Charlie, about Sophie, about Mia, about all the kids who'd been given a second chance, and he knew without a doubt that this was the most important thing he'd ever done. The road stretched out before him, endless and open, filled with possibility, and Bull rode on. Autumn arrived again, bringing with it the familiar chill in the turning of leaves. Bull was back in Millbrook, settled into the rhythm of life at the bar, but the phone never stopped ringing. The network had become a vital part of the national infrastructure for finding missing children, and Bull had become, whether he liked it or not, the face of the movement. One October afternoon, Bull was out in the garage, hands deep in engine grease, when his phone buzzed. He wiped his hands on a rag and answered. "Bull, Mr. Thompson, this is Director Karen Mitchell from the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. Do you have a moment?" Bull set down his tools. "I'm listening." "We've been following the work of your network for the past 2 years. The results are undeniable. You've helped recover over 300 children, many in situations where time was critical. We'd like to formalize a partnership with the FBI." Bull was quiet for a moment. "What kind of partnership?" "Official coordination. When we have cases that meet certain criteria, particularly in rural areas or situations where we need rapid, widespread mobilization, we'd like to be able to activate your network. In return, we provide resources, intelligence, and legal support." "What's the catch?" Bull asked. "No catch," Director Mitchell said. "We just recognize that your network is effective. We'd be foolish not to work with you." Bull thought it over. Working with the FBI meant more legitimacy, more resources, but it also meant more oversight, more structure. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. "I'll have to talk to my people," Bull said. "Of course, take your time, but I hope you'll consider it." That evening, Bull called another meeting. The core crew gathered at the bar, along with representatives from several other clubs via video call. Bull laid out the FBI's proposal. "It's a big step," Raven said, "but it could also make us more effective." Tank crossed his arms. "Or it could tie our hands. I don't like the idea of feds calling the shots." "They wouldn't be calling the shots," Bull said. "It's a partnership. We'd still operate the way we do. They'd just provide support." Gears leaned forward. "I say we do it. If it means saving more kids, I'm in." One by one, the others voiced their opinions. In the end, the vote was unanimous. They'd accept the FBI's offer. Bull called Director Mitchell back the next day. "We're in." "Excellent," Mitchell said. "I'll send over the paperwork. Welcome to the team." The partnership with the FBI opened new doors. The network gained access to federal databases, real-time intelligence, and advanced tracking technology. Rescues became faster, more precise, and with the FBI's backing, local law enforcement agencies were more willing to cooperate. But the work remained hard. The stakes remained high. One cold November night, Bull received a call from Director Mitchell herself. "We have a situation. 6-year-old girl abducted from a rest stop in Nevada. Suspect is believed to be crossing state lines. We need your network on this." Bull was on his bike within minutes. He made calls as he rode, mobilizing clubs in Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. Within an hour, over 100 bikers were on the move, covering highways, rest stops, and truck stops across 3 states. The search went on for 6 hours. Bull was in constant contact with the FBI, receiving updates on the suspect's vehicle, possible routes, and last known locations. Then, just after midnight, a club in Arizona spotted the vehicle at a gas station outside Flagstaff. Bull radioed the team. "Don't engage, surround and observe. FBI is 5 minutes out." The bikers moved into position, blocking the exits without being obvious. The suspect, a man in his 40s, finished pumping gas and got back into his car. He started the engine, then noticed the motorcycles surrounding him. He froze. FBI agents arrived moments later, weapons drawn. The man was pulled from the vehicle, cuffed, and taken into custody. In the back seat, wrapped in a blanket, was the little girl. She was unharmed. Bull watched from a distance as agents carefully carried the girl to a waiting ambulance. She was scared, disoriented, but alive. Director Mitchell approached Bull. "Good work." Bull nodded. "Just doing what we do. You and your people saved that girl's life tonight. I hope you know that." Bull didn't respond. He didn't need to. The story made headlines again. FBI and Biker Network team up to save abducted child. The partnership was hailed as a success, a model for how law enforcement and civilian volunteers could work together. But for Bull, it was just another night, another call, another kid brought home. Back in Millbrook, as winter set in, Bull found himself reflecting on the past few years. He'd never imagined his life would turn out this way. He'd been content to ride, to run the bar, to live simply. But life had other plans. One snowy December evening, Bull was alone in the bar, nursing a drink, when the door opened. A man in his 30s walked in, snowflakes dusting his shoulders. "We're closed," Bull said. "I know," the man said. "I just wanted to meet you." Bull studied him. "Do I know you?" "No, but you saved my daughter 4 years ago. She was lost in the woods in Pennsylvania. Your network found her." Bull nodded slowly. "I remember. Little girl with red hair. About 5 years old?" "That's her," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's 9 now. Doing great. I never got to say thank you, so I wanted to come here and say it in person." Bull stood and extended his hand. "You don't need to thank me." The man shook his hand, holding it tight. "Yeah, I do. You gave me my daughter back. That's everything." Bull nodded. "How is she?" "She's amazing," the man said, pulling out his phone. He showed Bull a photo, a girl with red hair smiling, holding a soccer trophy. "She's fearless, strong, because of you." Bull looked at the photo for a long moment, then handed the phone back. "She's strong because of you. You raised her. Don't forget that." The man smiled, tears in his eyes. "Thank you." After he left, Bull sat back down and stared at his drink. He thought about all the families, all the kids, all the moments like this one, and he realized something. This was his legacy. Not the bar, not the bikes, not the rides. This, the lives he'd helped save, the families he'd helped keep together. That was what mattered, and as long as he could, he'd keep doing it. Spring came again, as it always did, bringing warmth and new growth to Millbrook. Bull had turned 63 that winter, though he didn't celebrate. Age was just a number, and he still rode as hard as he ever had. But he could feel time pressing on him, could feel the weight of the years in his bones. One morning, Bull received an email from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They were hosting a gala in Washington, D.C. to honor individuals and organizations that had made significant contributions to child safety. The network, and Bull specifically, was being honored. Bull read the email twice, then deleted it. Raven found out and confronted him. "You're not going?" "No." "Bull, this is a big deal. They're recognizing the work we've done." "I don't need recognition," Bull said. "The work speaks for itself." Raven crossed her arms. "This isn't about you. It's about the network. It's about showing people that this kind of work matters. You owe it to everyone who's been a part of this to show up." Bull stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, I'll go." The gala was held in a grand ballroom in D.C., filled with politicians, law enforcement officials, child advocacy leaders, and families whose children had been saved by various organizations. Bull felt out of place in his suit, uncomfortable under the chandeliers and the scrutiny of so many eyes. But when his name was called and he walked onto the stage to accept the award, the room erupted in applause. He looked out at the crowd and saw faces he recognized, families he'd helped, kids who were now teenagers, now adults, parents who'd been given a second chance. He saw Emma, now a high school senior, sitting with her mother and Charlie, who was taller and more confident than Bull remembered. They were clapping, smiling, tears in Karen's eyes. Bull held the award, a heavy crystal plaque, and stepped up to the microphone. "I'm not good at speeches," he said. The room laughed softly. "But I want to say this. The work we've done, it's not about me. It's about every single person who's ever answered the call. Every biker who's dropped everything to search for a kid they've never met. Every volunteer who's spent hours in the cold and the rain. Every family who's trusted us to help." He paused, his voice steady. "Kids go missing every day. And every day, people like us have a choice. We can look away or we can show up. We chose to show up. And we're gonna keep showing up for as long as it takes." The applause was deafening. Bull stepped off the stage, and as he walked through the crowd, people reached out to shake his hand, to thank him, to share their stories. He listened to each one, nodding, acknowledging their pain and their gratitude. Later that evening, Emma found him outside, standing on a balcony overlooking the city. "Hey," she said. Bull turned. "Hey, kiddo, you've grown up." Emma smiled. "Yeah, a lot's changed. You doing good?" "Really good," Emma said. "I got accepted to college. I'm going to study social work. I want to help kids like Charlie, like me." Bull nodded. "That's good, real good." Emma stepped closer. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. None of us would." Bull looked out at the city lights. "You'd have found a way. You're strong." "Maybe," Emma said, "but you gave me the chance to find out." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the years between them, the bond that had been forged that night so long ago. "Thank you," Emma said quietly. Bull nodded. "You're welcome." As Emma walked back inside, Bull stayed on the balcony, the cool night air washing over him. He thought about all the roads he'd traveled, all the calls he'd answered, all the lives that had intersected with his, and he felt for the first time in a long time at peace. The next morning, Bull returned to Millbrook. He walked into the bar and it felt like coming home. The jukebox was playing, the crew was there, laughing and talking. Everything was as it should be. Raven looked up. "How was it?" "It was good," Bull said. "You give a speech?" "Sort of." Raven grinned. "Look at you, Mr. Inspirational." Bull grunted and poured himself a drink. Over the next few months, Bull began thinking more seriously about the future. He was getting older, and while he wasn't ready to step down, he knew he needed to start preparing for it. He spent time mentoring younger members of the network, passing on the knowledge and experience he'd gained over the years. Mia, who had joined the crew a few years earlier, had become one of the most dedicated members. She rode hard, worked tirelessly, and had a natural ability to connect with families in crisis. Bull saw a lot of potential in her. One afternoon, Bull pulled her aside. "I want to talk to you about something." Mia looked concerned. "What's up?" "I'm not stepping down yet," Bull said. "But when I do, I think you should take over." Mia's eyes widened. "Me? Bull, I don't—" "You do," Bull interrupted. "You've got the skills, the heart, and the respect of the crew. You're ready." Mia was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "If you think I can do it, I'll do it." "I know you can," Bull said. As the seasons changed again, Bull continued to ride, continued to answer the calls, continued to do the work. But now there was a sense of completion, a feeling that he'd done what he was meant to do. One evening, as the sun set over Millbrook, Bull sat on his bike, looking out at the open road. The wind was cool, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. He thought about Emma and Charlie, about Sophie, about Mia, about all the kids who'd been given a second chance. And he smiled, because in the end, that was all that mattered. The road was long, but he'd traveled it well, and he wasn't done yet. Years passed and the network continued to grow. What had once been a grassroots effort by a handful of motorcycle clubs had become a national institution, recognized by the FBI, supported by nonprofits, and celebrated by families across the country. The numbers were staggering. Over 1,000 children recovered, dozens of abductors brought to justice, countless families reunited. Bull was 70 now, his beard fully gray, his body marked by decades of riding and hard living. But his spirit remained strong. He still rode, though not as often. He still answered calls, though he let the younger members take the lead. And he still ran the bar, though more and more, he found himself sitting and watching, rather than working. One crisp October morning, Bull received a call from Director Mitchell at the FBI. "Bull, I wanted to let you know something before it goes public," she said. "What's that?" "The network you built has officially been designated as a federal partner in child recovery efforts. It's the first civilian organization to receive that designation. Your work has changed the way we approach these cases." Bull was quiet for a moment. "That's good." "Good?" Mitchell laughed. "Bull, that's historic. You should be proud." "I am," Bull said simply. "Proud of the people who did the work." "Well, they learned from the best," Mitchell said. "Thank you, Bull, for everything." After the call, Bull sat in the quiet bar, the morning light streaming through the windows. He thought about the journey, about the little girl who'd burst through those doors so many years ago, terrified and desperate. He thought about how one moment, one decision to help, had led to all of this. Life was strange that way. That afternoon, Bull took a ride. It was a beautiful day, the leaves turning brilliant shades of red and gold, the air crisp and clean. He rode through the countryside, past farms and forests, along winding roads he'd traveled 1,000 times before. He stopped at a lookout point and killed the engine. The view stretched out before him, endless and open, the world laid bare in all its beauty and complexity. Bull thought about Emma, who was now a social worker helping at-risk kids. He thought about Charlie, who just started college, studying to be a teacher. He thought about Mia, who was leading the network with skill and compassion. He thought about all the families, all the kids, all the lives that had been changed. And he thought about himself, about the man he'd become, the legacy he'd leave behind. He'd never set out to be a hero. He just wanted to help. But in helping, he'd found purpose. He'd found meaning. He'd found something bigger than himself. Bull sat on his bike for a long time, the wind rustling through the trees, the sun warm on his face. And then, slowly, he smiled. Because he knew, without a doubt, that he'd done what he was meant to do. He'd shown up. He'd made a difference. And that was enough. Bull started his bike and rode back toward Millbrook, the road stretching out before him, familiar and welcoming. As he pulled into the parking lot of the bar, he saw the crew gathered outside, their bikes lined up in neat rows, laughter and conversation filling the air. Raven looked up as he approached. "Where have you been?" "Just riding," Bull said. "Good ride?" "Yeah," Bull said. "Real good." That evening, as the sun set and the lights of the bar flickered on, Bull stood at the window, looking out at the motorcycles, at the people he'd come to call family. The phone rang. Another call, another missing child, another family in need. Bull answered. "Yeah, we'll be there." He hung up and turned to the crew. "We got a call. Missing kid in Ohio. Let's move." The crew didn't hesitate. They grabbed their helmets, started their engines, and rolled out into the night, the roar of their bikes echoing through the streets of Millbrook. And Bull rode with them, his hands steady on the handlebars, his eyes on the road ahead. Because as long as there were kids out there waiting to be found, as long as there were families hoping for a miracle, he would keep showing up. That was who he was. That was what he did. And he would never stop. The road stretched out before him, endless and open, filled with possibility and purpose. And Bull rode on. The call in Ohio turned out to be a false alarm. The child, a 10-year-old boy, had run away after an argument with his parents and was found safe at a friend's house before the network even arrived. It happened sometimes. Not every call resulted in a dramatic rescue. But Bull and the crew didn't mind. Better a false alarm than a tragedy. As they rode back through the night, Bull thought about how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The core mission remained. Show up, help, make a difference. Everything else was just noise. When they arrived back in Millbrook, dawn was breaking. The sky was painted in soft pinks and purples, the world quiet and still. Bull parked his bike and sat for a moment, watching the sunrise. Raven pulled up next to him. "You okay?" "Yeah," Bull said. "Just thinking." About? About how lucky I've been to have this, to have all of you." Raven smiled. "We're the lucky ones, Bull. You gave us something to believe in." Bull looked at her. "We gave each other something to believe in." Raven nodded. Yeah, I guess we did. They sat in silence watching the sun rise over the town, over the bar, over the motorcycles that had carried them through so many miles, so many missions. Eventually, Bull stood. I'm getting too old for all-nighters, Raven laughed. You and me both. Inside the bar, the crew was winding down, some heading home, others staying for a drink before they left. Bull poured himself a whiskey and sat at the bar, the weight of the night settling over him. Tank came over and sat next to him. Wild ride. Yeah, Bull said. You ever think about stopping? Tank asked. Bull considered the question. Every now and then, but then the phone rings and I remember why I do this. Tank nodded. Same. They drank in silence, the bond between them unspoken but understood. Over the next few weeks, Bull found himself reflecting more and more on the legacy of the network. He wanted to make sure it would continue long after he was gone, that the work would endure. He started documenting everything, writing down protocols, sharing stories, ensuring that the knowledge and experience he'd gained over the years would be passed on. Mia helped him with this, sitting with him for hours asking questions, taking notes. She was a natural leader, and Bull was confident that when the time came, she'd be ready. One afternoon as they were working, Mia looked up. Do you ever regret it? All the time? All the energy you put into this? Bull shook his head. Not for a second. Even with everything you've given up, the quiet life you could have had? Bull smiled. I've had a good life, a full life, and I gotta make a difference. That's more than most people can say. Mia nodded. I hope I can do the same. You will, Bull said. I know you will. As the seasons turned once more, Bull began to feel the pull of the road in a different way. Not the urgent, mission-driven rides, but the kind of riding he loved when he was younger. The freedom rides, the journeys without a destination. One morning he announced to the crew that he was taking a trip, a long one, across the country from coast to coast, stopping wherever he felt like it, taking his time. How long you going to be gone? Raven asked. As long as it takes, Bull said. And if we need you? You won't, Bull said. You've got this. The crew gathered to see him off. There were handshakes, hugs, a few tears. Bull mounted his bike, the engine rumbling to life beneath him. He looked at the faces of the people he'd come to love, the people he'd fought beside, ridden with, laughed and cried with. Take care of each other, Bull said. Always, Raven replied. And with that, Bull twisted the throttle and rode off. The morning sun at his back, the open road ahead. He rode through mountains and deserts, along coastlines and through forests. He stopped at small-town diners and roadside motels, talked to strangers, listened to their stories. He visited clubs across the country, checked in on the network, saw the work continuing, thriving, and everywhere he went, people recognized him. Not because of the headlines or the awards, but because of the work, because of the kids he'd helped save, because of the hope he'd given to families in their darkest moments. One evening, in a small town in Oregon, Bull stopped at a diner. An older woman behind the counter smiled at him. You're Bull, aren't you? She said. Bull nodded. My granddaughter, the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. She was one of the kids you found 5 years ago. She's 17 now. Doing great. Bull smiled. That's good to hear. The woman came around the counter and hugged him. Thank you for everything. Bull hugged her back, feeling the weight of her gratitude, the depth of her relief. You're welcome, he said. As he rode on, Bull realized something. This was it. This was the life he was meant to live. Not a quiet retirement, not a slow fade into obscurity, but a life lived fully, on the road, connected to the people and the work he loved. He didn't know how much longer he had. None of us do. But he knew that when his time came, he'd go out knowing he'd lived well, that he'd made a difference, that he'd mattered. And that was enough. As the sun set on another day, Bull pulled into a campsite, set up his tent, and sat by the fire, staring up at the stars. The road had been long, but it had been good, and it wasn't over yet. Bull smiled, the warmth of the fire on his face, the vast expanse of the night sky above him, and he knew in his heart that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Bull returned to Millbrook after 3 months on the road. He was tanned, a little thinner, but his eyes were bright with the clarity that comes from time spent in solitude and reflection. The bar was exactly as he'd left it, the crew still gathering in the evenings, the jukebox still playing the same old songs. Raven was the first to see him. "Look who's back," Bull grinned. "Miss me?" "Every day," Raven said, and she meant it. The crew welcomed him home with open arms, and that night they celebrated, swapping stories, drinking, laughing. But Bull could see it in their faces. They'd done well without him. The network had continued to thrive. They didn't need him the way they once had, and that was exactly as it should be. Over the next few weeks, Bull settled back into life in Millbrook, but he knew something had shifted. He was ready to pass the torch, ready to let the next generation lead. One evening, Bull called a meeting. The core crew gathered, along with representatives from other clubs across the country, via video call. "I've been thinking," Bull said. "I've been doing this for a long time, and it's been the honor of my life. But it's time for me to step back, officially." There was silence in the room. "Mia," Bull said, turning to her, "I want you to take over as president of the Iron Wolves and head of the network." Mia's eyes widened. "Bull, You're ready," Bull said, "and you'll do great." "I know it." The crew nodded in agreement. One by one, they voiced their support. Mia stood, her voice steady. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Bull said. The transition was smooth. Bull stayed on as an advisor, offering guidance when asked, but stepping back from day-to-day operations. He spent his days working on bikes, taking rides, and enjoying the quiet moments he'd earned. One afternoon, Bull received a letter. It was from Emma, now 25, and working as a social worker in California. Inside was a photo of her standing with a group of kids she was helping, all of them smiling. The letter read, "Dear Bull, I wanted to share this with you. These are the kids I'm working with now. Every time I look at them, I think of you and what you did for me and Charlie. You showed me that one person can make a difference. That showing up matters. I'm trying to do the same, to show up, to help, to be the kind of person you were for us. Thank you, Bull, for everything. Love, Emma." Bull read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his wallet, next to the old drawing Charlie had made all those years ago. He sat on the porch of the bar, watching the sun set, the sky ablaze with color. The world felt full, complete. Raven came out and sat next to him. "You okay?" "Yeah," Bull said. "I'm good." They sat in silence, watching the sky change, the day giving way to night. "You did good, Bull," Raven said quietly. "You changed a lot of lives." Bull nodded. "We all did." As the stars began to appear, Bull thought about the journey, about the roads he'd traveled, the lives he'd touched, the families he'd helped. He thought about Emma and Charlie, about Sophie, about Mia, about all the kids who'd been given a second chance. And he thought about the crew, the family he'd built, the legacy he was leaving behind. He'd lived a good life, a life that mattered. And as the night settled in, Bull felt a deep, abiding peace. The road had been long, but it had been good. And though his journey was winding down, the work would continue. The network would endure. The kids would be found. The families would be reunited. Because people like Mia, like Raven, like the crew, would keep showing up. Just like he had, Bull stood and walked back inside, the warmth of the bar enveloping him. The jukebox was playing. The crew was laughing. Life was good. And as he sat down at the bar, a glass of whiskey in hand, Bull smiled, because he knew without a doubt that he'd done exactly what he was meant to do. He'd shown up. He'd made a difference. And that was all that mattered. The phone rang. Mia answered. Another call, another missing child, another family in need. Mia looked at Bull. He nodded. "We'll be there," Mia said. The crew mobilized. Engines roared to life. The convoy rolled out into the night, and Bull watched them go, pride swelling in his chest. Because the work wasn't over. It would never be over. And that was the most beautiful thing of all.